Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be part of this event. Today, we have a very interesting and relevant panel to discuss latest trends in diagnostics. COVID has changed the landscape of many industries, and healthcare evolved rapidly in the last 1.5 years. From vaccine development in an unimaginable timelines to point-of-care diagnostics, healthcare system across the world has successfully adopted new technologies to fight the pandemic. Our topic for today's discussion will cover how diagnostics and patient care has evolved, and what changes we expect in the future times. My name is Arunima Patel, and I'm the moderator for today's session. I'm the founder and CEO of iGenetic Diagnostics. We provide diagnostic services in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. And we also offer innovative tests in the infection detection space, which cuts down diagnostics time and provide higher accuracy of diagnostics. I would invite my co-panelists to introduce themselves. First one, Om. He doesn't need an introduction, but Om, why don't you spend maybe a few minutes on about yourself and the company?
Yeah, thank you, Runima, and good morning to all of you. My name is Om Manchanda. I am the Managing Director of Dr. Lal Path Labs. I've been here for nearly 16 years, and prior to this, I worked for 3 more companies, which is Hindustan Unilever, Ranbaxy, and Monsanto. I am passed out of IIM Ahmedabad in the year 1990, so a total of 30 years of experience. Over to you, Runima.
Thanks, Om. Dhananjay, would you like to go next?
Sure, Arunima, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Dhananjay Dindakuri. I'm CEO and co-founder of Achira Labs in Bangalore. We are a technology company that's focused on point-of-care medical diagnostics using microfluidic technologies. But in the context of COVID, we are also manufacturing a few products relevant to COVID, including PCR and ELISA tests for COVID. My own background is I have a PhD in chemical engineering from MIT, and before that I was at IIT Madras and University of Toronto.
Thank you, Dhananjay. Mudit, can you spend a few minutes on yourself and the company?
Thanks a lot, Arunima. So, hi, I'm Mudit. I'm CEO and co-founder of Dozy. We are a health AI company that specializes in contextless patient monitoring and collecting data and then arranging it in a meaningful way and giving AI-based alerts and triaging systems for both hospitals as well as for home monitoring of critical patients as well. I come from IIT Bombay, batch of 13. And before this startup, I used to work in a race car technology company. And I started Dozy in 2015, and now, helping India to upgrade its healthcare systems and patient care, both at hospitals as well as in wards.
From race car to healthcare, that's a phenomenal change. Good. So I'd like to ask the panelists, in their view, what are the permanent changes that you are seeing in the industry post-COVID? So maybe we'll start with Om first.
Yeah, I think this is the question which is getting asked very frequently to me by virtually everybody. And I'm also asking the same question to myself because we have really put down long-term sort of plan for our own company. I see, Arunima, 3 dimensions on which the changes are happening in diagnostics. And some of these changes are also accelerated by the event COVID, but they were in any case happening earlier also. So I think the first change that I see is that the diagnostics in the past actually has been more chemistry-based or routine chemistry, as we call it, or routine hematology. But now I see the role of molecular becoming extremely important in the area of both infectious diseases as well as even cancer diagnosis. And it's not only just linked to diagnosis, but of treatment. So if I were to sum up one dimension there, I see a big change is that the routine chemistry, liver function, kidney function tests, they won't disappear. But I do believe that molecular or genetic testing will form a significant part of this portfolio. That's one change that I see. Second change that I see is in the area of service. Uh, I think diagnostic was not that frequently consumed maybe about a couple of decades back. It was only when you had some symptom, you want to know what the problem is, and it was like a problem solution kind of format. But now diagnostic testing actually has become sort of, I would say, fulcrum or right at the center of everything what we do around healthcare. So, which essentially means the frequency of consumption by anybody and everybody, whether you are a patient or you're a normal person, actually has moved up significantly. Now, what does it mean? It essentially means is that the quality of diagnostics or service provider is given. It's a service or the convenience and everything else around that is what is gaining significance. And I would draw a parallel to airlines business. We don't even suspect that any airline will have where safety is compromised, right? That's given for any airline, right? But we choose now airlines more on the kind of service, convenience, and everything else that comes around this. So same thing is happening on diagnostic as well. So I don't think one player is chosen over the other because the quality is better. But I think that's a base which is given. But one diagnostic player is chosen over the other because it's a very convenient experience that one goes through. So I think that's a second dimension. And on this dimension, there are many areas that are really coming, which is, of course, I'm sure some of you would cover in your talk, is the point of care testing and even home diagnostics. I'm seeing that trend as well. So I would call that dimension as a convenience. I think the third dimension, which is actually a very interesting dimension, is the business model itself. There are legacy models like brick and mortar where you had labs and you had collection center, you had a physical sort of a thing. And now with this COVID coming in, acceptance of online virtual stuff has become sort of a norm in healthcare, which essentially means there is a lot of data being generated, and which essentially means there is a lot of AI and machine learning and analytics you can do around that data. And you are seeing a lot of these e-commerce and online model coming up. So I just want to sum up. There are three dimensions on which I'm seeing change. One is the way testing actually is done, which is genetic testing becoming very, very significant part of our, and I would call it molecular rather. And then patient convenience is becoming a central sort of part in this entire thing. And third dimension is the new business models that I'm seeing emerging in the industry. So I think with those comments, I'll hand it over to you again.
Yeah. No, I completely concur in terms of molecular diagnostics becoming a mainstay. I remember we have been doing infection testing for really specialized work using RT-PCR. But every time you talked about RT-PCR to doctors or patients, maybe 3 years back, there was a very strong reaction saying, very advanced technology. We don't know what that means. But RT-PCR has become, my child knows what RT-PCR is today. Yeah. So everybody has heard that term. That's a very big change. We've also seen changes happening in the patient care segment. So Dhananjay and Mudit, you operate in that space. What changes have you seen?
Yeah. So I think to add to what Om's already mentioned, I think first of all, IVD was like the poor cousin of pharma, in the Indian healthcare space. And I think today the number of zeros that the diagnostics companies and labs have made has attracted the interest of everybody. I think that's a good thing for the industry. There's a lot of interest from even big pharma today in diagnostics. They were not really looking at entering that in any way, but many of them today have plans to somehow get, allied with diagnostics. Even within diagnostics companies, I can tell you our Association of Diagnostics Manufacturers of India has literally doubled in strength over the past year. Because again, driven by the demand, a number of players have entered this space literally over the past year. And also, I think a lot more networking and partnerships among these players, which is only a good thing, I think these are on the larger industry side. This is a very good thing. The molecular thing has already been mentioned. And I think the amount of lab infrastructure, the number of NABL accredited labs that have again happened over the last year. This is something that's again going to be, I think, good for the future in terms of the IVD industry. There's also the arrival of point of care as a mainstream platform, both whether it's rapid tests or the success of a company like Malbio with their point of care platform, which is one of the few ones which really reached, tier 2, tier 3. I think this is a big arrival moment for a point of care in the mainstream in India. The education of people, like you already mentioned, your average person now suddenly knows what SpO2 and CT value and all this means. And I think that's going to mean that people will demand better and higher quality information, which is also a good thing. Finally, on the regulatory side also, suddenly the role of ICMR has become very important, especially for people in COVID. And I think this is formalizing, or as a country, we're trying to figure out how to regulate a lot of things, right? So I think a lot of learnings over there about how new tests, new platforms, etc., we can get regulated and actually get into the market, right? I think there's been some very fast-forwarded learning that has happened for everybody, and I think we'll need more and more sort of build up of capabilities on that front going forward.
Thanks, Dhananjay. Mudit, your company operates in patient care domain and use of AI. Just tell us more about what changes you've seen.
So, one of the biggest changes I would say, which is there, is that the need of technology itself is felt, right? And I'm saying this both in hospital kind of a care as well as at home as well. So earlier, as in the care, as Om and Dhananjay, both of them mentioned, it was more of a, I would say snapshot basis and a reactive basis. So when something goes wrong, then you are, you go through the testing, screening, then you figure out the cause, and on that you are acted upon. But in India, right, so while we are managing close to 200 to 250 million people, right, with either chronic condition or elderly care, and the number is only going to go up, right? It is expected to be more than 300 million in next 7 to 10 years, right? And the amount of doctors, nursing staff, everything that we are going to have, we are depleted, right? The specialist to chronic patient ratio is 1:3,000, 4,000, right? So there is no way probably that we can, take care of them, ensure quality care to each one of them without having the use of technology and AI into that, right? So that need kind of was greatly exposed in the COVID itself, but it always, existed, and now it is highlighted, and now everyone is accepting that fact, right? So what we have also seen is, right from the entire ecosystem, governments to hospitals to physicians, right? Everyone has much more acceptance towards technology. They are not no more seeing that as a competitor, but a need, right? And the use of AI itself has actually increased many folds, and this is what we have seen a paradigm shift, pre-COVID to post-COVID market, right? Where we were pitching the same product, but we have seen very differing acceptance in the market of that, right? And that is something which has really catapulted ahead the entire curve. The second thing which Dhananjay mentioned, the education of the market and the patient's family, patients itself, they have also understood that, when we could also take care of our managed conditions much better with more data, right? And that self-care has also come into picture, right? And we have seen more and more adoption, as in now everyone, I think, has a SpO2 and basic BP machines and so on at their homes as well, right? While we are then looking to even make it even more streamlined, right? With Dozy as well, we are trying to make it more seamless, contactless, so that they can do it on a regular basis, right? So that adoption itself has been important and moving because of both shift in and acceptance in both from patients, clinicians, physicians, hospitals, and even from government as well, right? So we have seen that a paradigm shift over there.
Thanks. I think next question is Om for you. Given that the innovation in healthcare is rapidly evolving now post COVID, how are the large players? What are the large players changing in their modus operandi? Let me put it this way, to be ready for the world that's coming.
So I think the one area which large players are acutely aware of, that most of us at the top are not young. We are actually a fairly old companies, and I think the injection of talent, which is tech-driven, is one very big priority for us. While some of us at the top do realize that that's the way the world is moving towards, but if you have to really go on that path and be ahead of everybody else, I think the whole spine of the organization has to undergo a big change. And obviously, you can't really replace the entire talent, right? So you have to really upgrade it. So I think, to my mind, tech, sort of a quotient of our company, is one big priority for us. Second is in terms of focus on consumer or patient. It's one thing to say that COVID has come now, everybody wants home visit. But I think it's important to know that once the COVID settles down, what is the new sort of a landscape? I definitely know that what we are seeing is definitely not the new reality. What we have seen in the past also is not the new reality, but I think that's going to be something else. To my mind, it's going to be probably a combination of both, because the pendulum has swung completely on the other side because of COVID. But I think once COVID is taken out of the equation, then you may settle down with something which looks a little hybrid in nature. And I would call that as an online-offline model, which is not purely online. I think the retail also has been through the same thing where, and healthcare is one business. I think while all of us would want this to be online, but I think at some point in time, my sense is there is a lot of value of being face-to-face. Like all of us are missing out to be all the social interaction that we used to have. And I think same thing also happens in healthcare. Somebody was asking me the other day that how are the OPDs in the hospitals? And I think there is a tendency for patients also to see the doctor personally, because face-to-face interaction also has a therapeutic aspect, right? It's not just only the medicine.
Yeah.
So to my mind, I think we have to actually really visualize what is going to happen to the patient post-COVID and prepare organizations to cater to that need. I think that's a second dimension, I would say. And to my mind, that has an implication on the business model that we have. We can't be brick and mortar. We can't be completely online and just say that I will cut off all the interaction with the patient face to face. I think it's somewhere in between is where probably as an organization we're going to focus on.
No, you're right, Tom. As far as healthcare is concerned, patients they still value face-to-face interaction. They still want to see what, where their testing is happening or what doctors are seeing them, what kind of healthcare infrastructure is behind the services that is being offered online. There's something to be said about the face value as far as healthcare delivery is concerned. So you're absolutely right. We are also expecting that there will be some sort of a hybrid model that will evolve. But the good thing that COVID has done is the acceptance of innovation has gone up significantly. So we do expect that whether it's doctor or patients, they will take. Earlier, the innovation used to be taken with a pinch of salt. Traditional ways were always better, but now we expect that adoption will be faster. So now my next question is need for innovation versus reverse engineering and import substitution in the Indian IVD context. I think what we have seen in the early part of the pandemic, especially March and April, we all really struggled to import, whether it's machinery, whether it's kits, whether it's PPE, and that sort of drove the prices up significantly for all players. And then the Indian manufacturers got very active. And by September, the things had settled down in terms of the supply. And that brought to light the importance of Indian manufacturing. Dhananjay, would you like to put in some more thoughts in terms of what you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like you rightly said about the timeline, we started off with a phase where many simple things even had to be imported to actually now generating a lot of the tests that we use within the country. However, at the same time, I'd like to point out that there are many key aspects of this which are still not being made in India, and they can't happen overnight, right? Let's take an instrument platform for PCR, right? Those are still in the hands of the large multinational companies. And it takes time to evolve that kind of capabilities. Thankfully, today, PCR is still an open system. So there is room for, let's say, reagent companies to play with an open system. But, you could see eventually that there might be a push to make even these closed systems to capture more economic value, right? So I think one of the lessons for us as a country is that we need to maybe evolve more of these instrument platforms in order to kind of retain more of the economic value within India. That's one of the objectives. Secondly, I think on the chemistry side, I think there's still a lot of key things, whether you take attack polymerase or enzymes of that kind, primers, probes. I think still it is fair to say that a majority of that is getting imported. Now there are efforts in India, and I think grassroots efforts, a lot of things happening, and we should be highly encouraging of those, so that more and more of the end-to-end chain is basically established within India. I mean, to give you an example, I think if you take your average PCR reagent today, the dominant cost in that is the enzyme. Okay. And if you are not able to get hold of that at a low cost way, I mean, that really sets the price for the test. The second thing that I want to say in terms of the acceptance of innovation is, while I think there's a lot of acceptance of digital innovation, basically a layer of digital innovation on top of existing physical services, I think that is seen like a very rapid takeoff, as you can see, whether it's telemedicine or whatever Mudit said earlier. But I think innovating on the physical side is a lot more complicated, right? And I think needs a much, much higher risk appetite. So we saw many announcements of different kinds of diagnostic tests, for example, that would be, very game changing or innovative and so on. But the fact of the matter is many of them have actually failed to really make an impact on the ground, not for any fault of the technology, but I think these things need a certain kind of infrastructure and availability of robust supply chain and so on to actually become available on the ground, right? So I think there's a lot of learnings there that while innovation on the digital side in some sense is faster, on the hardware chemistry side, we really have to invest as a country and spend a lot more time so that when the next pandemic comes, whenever that is, we're ready to react in a much faster way.
Yeah. Have you seen any impetus from the government side for whether it's reduction in duties or ease of import that you feel that's promising?
Yeah, certainly. I think for the longest time, or maybe even now, I think a lot of the COVID reagents, were allowed to be imported at minimal duties and so on. Again, the reality is, as a small company, or to kind of figure out the entire thing and get it done is a different thing. But there's some rules like that exist today. I think importing things has been a bugbear for everybody, especially when you want something tatkal. It is very difficult still to get things in India the next day or the day after, and things tend to get stuck and so on. So there are some things that we need to improve over there, I would say, as well. But I think overall, a lot of learnings for the system in terms of, even by the way, customs today has this faceless mechanism today. So you can actually do the entire thing without having to physically go to an airport or to a customs warehouse or whatever. So I think there's been some improvements on that as well, but still, I think some more ways to go in that direction.
My next question is around role of AI, and I'd like Mudit to go first and Om to speak afterwards. In terms of what have you seen is the evolving role of AI in patient care as well as diagnostics?
Some things, and I'll just also like to also add little bit on what Dhananjay also said in the earlier question. So I'll come to this AI one, but also as much as there is on the molecules, reagents and things like that, I think even India's dependence on medical devices, also what Dhananjay was saying, is enormous. Right now we are importing more than about 85% of devices from outside. And we saw that the concentrator fiasco that happened right all along, right? And that was really scary, and I think also a wake-up call for all of us, that also that is a place where a lot of investing needs to be done, because it takes time for that to create. But at the same time, this is also the age where we need to be self-dependent even in that part as well, right? So with Dozy, it is both a combination of both a medical device of the contactless sensor that we provide, as well as the AI. So coming to your AI question now, right? So there's a huge role, right? So in fact, if we see AI has played a big role right from everything that we use on a day-to-day basis today, right from your traffic prediction to weather prediction to everything, right? It is really governing our life today. The way we just go about our normal lifestyle without AI, I think it will become to a large extent very difficult. Healthcare, I think, because of being very regulated industry and something which is driven by practices which are centuries old as well in many places, right? I think it is one of the laggards in AI. It's a high time where healthcare will, and it is a place where it can play the largest amount of impact, right? But at the same time, as Om mentioned, it is not going to be like that, suddenly AI will happen and everything will get changed. It will be a hybrid model over there of both physical interaction as well as AI, right? So the role of entire AI part is, in my opinion, going to be to augment and improve the efficiency of the system that we have, right? As I mentioned, so we have doctor specialist to chronic case patient ratio of 1:3,000, right? How is that even physically possible that one person can take care of so many people, right? uh, and manage them. So that's where I think a very general and easy use case, or very logical use case comes, where AI will kind of filter them. That's what we try to do in Dozy. So it will filter them, triage them, and it will tell the doctor that these 10 patients today are at high risk. You should be talking to them today and calling them to clinic and seeing them for sure. Apart from this, whoever is incoming, that's for sure that you are supposed to talk to them, right? So that's a very simple but powerful use case. But by just doing this, we have been able to save in last 6 months close to 1,000 lives. Now that's a huge impact that we have seen in a very small mini application that we have done, and now we plan to do it even ahead. So right now we are investing in algorithms in heart failures and things like that, so that we can predict this in early stages so that it can be managed very early. So that is more towards the data prediction and preemptive alerting that can be done. But similarly, there are lots many places, right, from radiology, cardiology to in terms of interpreting echo, interpreting the X-ray reports, OCR management, and everything, right? So there are lots of places where AI digitization can really change the entire efficiency in the this kind of right now very inefficient system of healthcare.
Thanks, Mudit. So, in terms of diagnostics, we've seen a lot on the radiology side, where people are trying to digitize the data and trying to put AI's layer. As far as pathology is concerned, it hasn't happened. Do you expect any change there, or are you seeing anything that's happening in that space?
Actually, I know you run a diagnostic company, and personally, I feel that we were already doing AI. Because this whole step of validation, which is auto validation, right? The report before it is released, right? So there is a human intervention that you are seeing the values there in place, etc. But 60, I don't remember exact number, but very large number of our reports were auto validated. Now, this auto validation is nothing but AI, because you have designed certain algorithms where you train the system to say that if the values find within this range, the report is normal. If values are found outside that range, that means the report is abnormal. You can also train the system saying that if the patient with the same ID has come 10 times, and it is one odd report which is completely out of sync, can actually highlight this to you. So even AI was actually, according to me, was always being used in pathology. But I think what really is happening that now AI is helping to even analyze images. Say, for example, digital pathology. All the slides, you can actually scan them. And I think, as Mudit rightly said, that this whole lopsidedness on distribution of doctors in our country, where many of them are in urban areas where the smaller towns don't have access. So you can actually scan slides and gross it up in the tier 2, tier 3 towns, but somebody in the urban areas or metros is actually reading those slides. So technically that can give you a lot of operating efficiencies. I think you asked me a question of use of AI in pathology. I think clearly we are very aggressively using this in our histopathology. And it is not only helping us to improve the output, which is number of slides being read per doctor, but it is also helping in I think, quality of diagnosis as well. It actually enables human eye to pick the sort of a lesion even at a very early stage. And it's been proven quite a bit in MR scans and CT scans, where at times machines are able to pick some of these changes which human eye cannot catch. So I think it's actually helping on both sides in terms of not only just improving efficiency, but also reducing the error rate in diagnosis. And I think there's another area which may not be pathology driven, but I think the way businesses is run. While testing is one part of it, but I think all of it are consumed by the way we service our patients. And there was a time I recall when I started my career 30 years back, those typically answering machines had come, and we were very, very uncomfortable even leaving a message on the phone on the other side saying that so and so called up, please call back, right? We always used to disconnect the phone and not wanting to talk to answering machines because we were always comfortable in talking to people on the person on the other side. But now it is actually completely gone on the other side. I'm actually not very interested in talking to person on the other side. I'm very comfortable in talking to machine. Which could be, and if there is a chat bot, I just need to type few words and I know my question is answered. So it just takes this hassle of a few rings and I'm waiting for somebody to address to me, hello, good morning. I don't think people are actually comfortable with that. So the point that I'm saying is that the interface now is become between machine and humans rather than human to human. And a lot of this actually can be replaced the way we run our business. It may not be just pathology specific, but in general, that is what one is seeing, whether you see food delivery, you see Amazon. I think same thing is happening. We are using chatbots these days. I can even actually analyze various conversations that happen between my patients and the customer care department and mood swings that are there. So I think there is a lot of application of new age technologies to really look at what can be done in the business. So I'm particularly very excited about this new age stuff which is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of patient data, especially when it comes to healthcare, patients are very, very sensitive about their data protection, privacy. How can patients or how can consumers ensure the data security and privacy is maintained by companies? Modit, Dhananjay, anybody would like to respond to that?
Yeah, I can go if you want. So
Sure.
no, I'll come from a more from a devices and that point of view. But there are so in India also I think a lot of regulations are coming. So it's in about 8 to 9 months we are expecting an overhaul in the entire patient data safety protocols, which are being adopted from different countries, right? So that is upcoming. But generally there are international standards which are there, like ISO 27001, 27017 and so on, which basically mandates you to delink the data of the patient. The ownership of the data also is with the patient, right? So they can take an action on what they can do and things like that. So access needs to be there. So patient in a way can control the data flow. And secondly, also there are guidelines like HIPAA and GDPR as well, which are there in the US or European Union on how to basically use this data and even where this data can be stored and how. Right, so all of those guidelines are there, I think. So they are not very abstract now that someone needs to really imagine them. So I think these things are there. You can really be confident that you are doing it well, but at the same time, security is something which is always need to on top of that, right? So best practices probably which as a company you can do is to hire some hackers and make sure that they are keep on finding the holes in your system, and you are filling them before anyone else outside finds them, right? So I think these are the general practices which we have seen good companies follow, and we are trying to do the same. But I think this is a very, very critical segment now. Everyone, is very particular about how their data is being managed, right? Because a lot of cloud and, as much as we are saying cloud AI, they bring a lot of advantages. These are the some of the problems also which comes along with that. And rightly so, whoever is, dealing with them needs to be on top of them as well. So, yeah.
Got it. So my last question for the panelists before we take the questions from the participant is each of you, what do you expect next 3 years to look like, whether it's diagnostics or patient care is concerned? Maybe would you like to go first?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned in my opening comments, there are 3 areas that I see in next 3 to 5 years. One is a portfolio of tests or new technology. So I think it's clearly moving towards molecular. I think already a lot of capacity is created in this country, and I'm going to see that more and more happening down the pop center. So that's one change that I see. Second change I see is a lot of innovation in the area of making the entire experience very convenient for the patient. It can be anything. It could be home visits. It could actually be, why do I need to wait for 8 hours for the report to come? Can I get it then and there itself? Can I actually have all under one roof, which is full stack model? Can I actually do an e-consult? And I think this whole area of patient convenience is one thing that I see is one big change that's emerging. I think the third area is that this whole patient convenience actually has been possible because of digital technologies. And by adopting digital stuff as a side effect, we are generating a lot of data. Now, that data actually is a fuel to do further innovation, which is AI that we just talked about. There are a lot of use of this entire data which is being generated in healthcare. I think that's something which probably healthcare ecosystem will find how to use that. I think one big use that I see, we didn't talk about this much, is that 60-70% of healthcare in India is under private. Public healthcare system is much weaker. But what I'm seeing is a very new trend, which is that the data flow is now going to happen from private to public. Let's take example of COVID testing, right? By end of every day, I know how many positive cases were there yesterday in India. Now, this has been possible because of new age technologies, right? If this whole thing wasn't there, I don't even know whether I would know what happened 3 months before. Today, I know what happened yesterday. And this data is being collated from bottom up, virtually entire country, the 600 districts, etc. So I think the beauty of this whole AI or digital piece is that the new sort of the partnership between public and private healthcare will emerge. And I believe that a lot of focus is going to go after public health systems in India, which is a very good news. And I think that's one area which I see going to change in the next 3 years. And already, I think this whole National Digital Health Mission is trying to achieve where standardization of various test codes, etc. There's a lot happening out there. So I think face of healthcare in India might just look very different 3 to 5 years from now.
Thanks, Om. Dhananjay?
Yeah, I think taking off from there, I'm a lot more optimistic about, I would say, the next decade now. And I think so far, if you look at again from a technology and diagnostics side, organizations like BIRAC, for instance, have been investing into Indian companies, Indian technologies. We ourselves have been a big beneficiary of that. I think what's hopefully also going to come in now is a lot more investments into the diagnostic space, into new diagnostic technology companies and so on, which could drive, I think, a lot more innovations on the hardware and chemistry side. Equally, I think the Indian government's resolve to spend, greater percentage of the GDP on healthcare will mean that a lot more of these technologies will find markets in India, especially in procurement projects, done by various state governments and so on. That's something that a lot of companies are hoping will happen. Then I think people have already mentioned that this consumer-focused kind of thing in healthcare, and I think from the diagnostics point of view, it will be interesting to see what sort of innovations there, again, can really help this. And I think there is going to be some interesting things emerge there to drive this whole more consumer-driven healthcare space. I think these are a few things. The last thing I think I'll mention is that in terms of regulatory standards, I think there will be a greater push on Indian companies to aspire to higher global standards, like CE and FDA approvals and so on. So we've created now a fairly large pool of companies, and for them to now look for markets even outside India becomes a natural thing. And I think many of them will be looking at higher standards of regulatory approval. So I think that will also naturally, lift regulatory standards across the board, which is a good thing.
Right. So no, excellent points by Om and Dhananjay. I think they have covered most, but I would say what I really want to see and how India grows, right? Rather than having a dependence on outside, we go more self-dependent, rather not just, and that is what we have shown the capability of doing, right? In vaccination and everything, India is capable of doing things at scale. If, given the right direction and right kind of resources. I think in terms of talent pool to everything, we have all of the good tick marks. We have young, still a good percentage of people who are young, right? So still we see a lot of new companies which are coming up and everything. As Dhananjay did mention, role of regulatory will become very important, especially to pull up the quality of healthcare. Not just healthcare, but the kind of devices, diagnostics, and everything which are coming out. So it will become a very important. We are seeing that in the right direction, that is moving along. So I am really hopeful that India really changes. As in we are right now ranked very low in terms of healthcare, and we really rise up in ranks over there. And I totally see the 2024 election in that, right? Healthcare being one of the key points of the agenda item in that as well, right? And I'm already seeing a lot of investments happening both in private and public setting in healthcare. So moving in the right direction, but we are a huge nation. We have to cater to a big population, and I think there is a need for everyone to step up over there if that has to be realized. So yeah, so hopeful and very happy that we are in this time and in this domain right now, right, which is very exciting.
Good. We have a lot of questions from the participants, so I'll start, and we have about 10 minutes. The first question being, genotype testing for somatic purposes can be very useful in early diagnostics. This type of testing is still too expensive and inaccessible for common person. What can be done to make this much more accessible and maybe even routine as a routine checkup? Both Om or Dhananjay, either of you can pick up this question.
Arunima, you should probably answer.
Yeah, I think this question you should answer.
In my experience, a few things that's helped quite a lot. This is a game of scale that's very important. When we run a batch of all 90 wells together, the cost comes down significantly for each patient. But if you have to run the same sort of batch for 10 patients, the cost is quite high of processing itself. That's one is with the greater adoption, we feel that volume will help bring down the cost itself. The second is that Indian manufacturers are coming on board. What MolBio has done or what others are doing in terms of Indian kits. You don't have import duty, you don't have expensive overheads on these kits. So that's also the second thing that's helping to bring down the cost of genomic testings in our experience. So these are the two things I'll say. And we've seen the cost, testing cost has come down quite significantly in the last 3-4 years that we have been in this this marketplace itself. Whether it's new non-invasive prenatal diagnostics or cancer markers. Tests which used to cost 30,000-40,000 rupees earlier, now it's come down to 6,000-7,000 rupees. It's all matter of volumes. Moving to the next question, how about preventive approach? One stark reality of COVID-19 is not the virus, but the fact that people have forgotten how to breathe, basic fact of life. I see many senior experts to have lifestyle derailing diseases. If many Indians are unwell, Ayushman Bharat has no chance to succeed. I think the question is around preventive. Again, from the market perspective, we've seen a significant jump in patient taking care of their own health parameters. We are seeing that in our business. It's the packages which are oriented towards preventive testing has gone up. Patients have become much more aware, and they call us and ask us what this parameter means and how do I test, how do I monitor that. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, I think it's this COVID has taught one lesson to all of us is that uh, there's only one life, it's too short. And there's something called comorbidity, which actually increases the risk. And people actually who are at risk who are not people who just got COVID, but COVID with diabetes and heart problems, etc. So many of these are lifestyle diseases, and a lot of people, at least in my ecosystem I talk to, they all are saying that preventive health checkup is very important. Catch it much early when the symptoms are not there. I think it's general awareness about health has gone up, so it's going to grow. There's no doubt about this.
Good. Next question: how do you foresee the use of wearable and their accuracy going forward, leading to better health management? Maybe Dozy would have that answer.
Yeah, I can answer that. So, I see definitely there is a role for wearables. And when we, talk about more ambulatory kind of data collection at home kind of a thing, at that time, wearable, do provide some very specific data points like activity levels, ambulatory heart rate. Even now they are coming up with ECGs and all that as well. So definitely a big role to play. But, these are just some of the pictures, and it requires little more to complete the snapshot, right? So what is required, I think in this age, is not one specific device and things like that, but overall and overarching infrastructure, which basically can, take care of person's health in a 360-degree kind of a view, right? So a lot of interactions and, interoperability will come into picture, and, role of wearable, non-wearable, medical devices, diagnostics, all everyone will play, a role, and shared that insight from their point of view, and overall a full picture of patient's health is then, made, which is presented to a clinician to give a much better care. So I think that is the future.
So I think I probably would want to add to what just Mudit said. To my mind, health account is like a reducing balance. So you know that it's actually going down. And in the past, actually, we always, when do you go and see a doctor? And we were waiting for some symptom to emerge, right? So that symptom usually will be some kind of pain you feel or fever. But I think that is changing now. And you want to see a doctor much before even these visible symptoms are. And some of these variables will really help in the sense that if you're monitoring some of these values, you know that something is not in sync and you want to see a doctor. Okay. I think this is going to be a big, these things have a big role to play. And I would use the word screening, and a lot of these home related screening stuff is actually going to gain a lot of significance in times to come.
Yeah, I think next one is it's guesswork. What percentage of healthcare do you think will move to digital in the next 5 years?
I think at least 60 to 70% should move towards digital. Right? Definitely that is the case. Digital will be certain, and I think government's pushes more with NDHM and all that. All depends on how much the acceptance of NDHM comes in. It is entirely aimed towards that. What I have seen is the entire, right from prescriptions to pharmacies to diagnostics to devices, right? It was a 5-year plan. So yeah.
The next question is, so do you think AI as a term is being over leveraged by businesses? I think this is specific to healthcare businesses. Should the consumer know why should the consumer know about AI before buying the claims? I don't think we have any insurance expert here, but anybody who would like to answer that question? Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Go on.
Yeah, sorry. So I don't think AI is a product actually itself. So it's an enabler in the entire business operations. I don't look at AI. I'm not selling AI or the proposition is not AI. I'm just trying to make my business efficient by use of one such technology. Like I use analyzers, I use new technology. To me, AI is just another enabler in the system that helps me to improve efficiency, that helps me to improve the outcomes. So I think I'll limit to that. So I don't think beyond that I see an AI as a. I know it's become very fashionable to use this term. I just look at this as an enabler in the system.
Yeah, you're right. And different industries are at different level of AI adoption. E-commerce largely uses for marketing purposes. What next product can I pitch to you? Healthcare uses in a different purpose altogether.
No, even in healthcare, even in healthcare also, it could be a recommendation engine, right? So I think the way you look at, let's say, marketing tool being used by many companies to recommend products to you, but here it could be a recommendation to a physician saying that, are you missing out some of these areas? If I can connect the dots from the past history of the patient or family history, which at times may not be available readily when you are meeting the doctor, but in the background, this data is lying. And if AI can help that, so you are able to pick the disease very early in its life cycle.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. In fact, oftentimes with the crunch of doctor itself in the country, what you've seen is that a doctor would get maybe a couple of minutes to read a slide, for example, or read through the patient history. That's where AI will play a significant role, saying that, look, these are the data points that you should focus on. And then there's always a layer of pathologist on top or a doctor on top reading that and giving the patient guidance.
Right.
And also one more just point on that part is also to ensure that, a consistent service is given, right? What also happens is when it is too much human dependent, we would just like to add a shade of technology. As in an industry, why do we do that? So that, a consistent product is made all along. So that a role of, using this AI as a technology is also for that, it, as Om mentioned, it's a recommended engine. Over and on top of that, I think for a foreseeable future, there is going to be a human intervention, but ensuring that consistency and quality and efficiency is what AI sells. So Om is absolutely right. No one sells AI. It's more about, you are ensuring those claims that you are making are consistent and, you are able to deliver even at a high volume as well. So.
Good. I think we are running out of time now for our panel. I really enjoyed this session. And thank you so much, all the participants, to ask these interesting questions. Thank you for panelists, Om, Dhananjay, Modit, for your valuable time and the discussion that we have had. Really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Arunima.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.